peace and grand rising to the sovereign, original, indigenous, ancient, natural, divine heirs. All rise and stand. This is a sovereign, living, ancient. Article 3, Moorish American, Al-Moroccan, consular court action. Article 3. I am sovereign living justice. Pauline Denise Ritchie, in capitis disscharge, in red ink, in propria persona juris, in proprio solo, in proprio heredes. My free chosen sovereign appellation is like Tajiri Bay, in capitis disscharge, in red ink, in propria persona juris, in proprio solo, in proprio heredes. We are the original indigenous, sovereign, ancient, Al-Moroccan, Moorish American ascendants of the first great holy living matriarch, and of the great pharaohs of Kemet, and of the ancient Moabites and Canaanites. Our full faith and trust, our allegiance, our credit, and our energy are hereby vested in ourselves, for we are the people who are the original indigenous, natural, divine, de jure, Moorish National Republic federal government, and the sovereign ancient empire state of Morocco. We hereby exercise all sovereign rights as inherited from the first great matriarch at this time and at all points in time, nunc pro tunc. Okay. First, we want to do a quick check to make sure that that you all can hear me. So if you could just put it in the chat if you can hear. Islam. Perfect. Islam. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So the first thing that we want to talk about today, I want to read. I want us to look quickly at why we are demonstrating the way we're demonstrating right now. Because as you can see, everything is changing. Even as we speak, everything is changing in our favor. So I want to refer us to the Holy Quran of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, Circle 7, as divinely prepared by the Prophet Noble Ali, chapter 47, verses 14 through 17. This is going to answer a lot of questions in terms of why we're doing what we're doing. Verse 14 says, and I'm actually going to, first verse 14. Every subordinate temple of the Grand Major Temple is to form under the covenant of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and create their own laws and customs in conjunction with the laws of the Holy Prophet and the Grand Temple. And by the way, the Grand Temple is all Moors at North America. That's the Grand Temple, all original indigenous Moors at North America. It says, I, the Prophet Noble Ali, was sent by the great God Allah to warn all Asiatics of America to repent from their sinful ways before that great and lawful day, which is sure to come. The time has come that every nation must worship under his own vine and fig tree, and every tongue must confess his own. Through sin and disobedience, every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact that they honored not the creed and principles of their forefathers. That is why the nationality of the Moors was taken away from them in 1774. And the word Negro, black, and colored was given to the Asiatics of America who were Moorish descent because they honored not the principles of their mother and father and strayed after the gods of Europe whom they knew nothing of. So there in the Holy Quran is the reason why we're demonstrating the way that we're demonstrating at this time. Because in 1774, the foreign colonizers, that was the first time in this manifestation of this dimension that they capitalized everything that has to do with us, and none of us rebutted it. I spoke about maybe a year ago the hybrids who are holding what they call their founding document have a writing scripted by the one that was doing business as Benjamin Franklin, and they spoke about the instance where he first capitalized the words United States and why he did that. And he also capitalized in that same writing that they still have today. They have copies of that today in their founding records. And he capitalized the United States, and he also capitalized the appellation of King Charles. King Charles, the reason he did that was because he was angry. He was angry, and he wanted to disrespect his master. We know that the kings in the 1600s that sent the hybrids were Moors as well. So our nationality, again, it was not taken. We consented. We assented to that. No one can take our nationality because they can't take the blood out of every last one of us. And there are more of us that are manifesting in this demonstration and in this dimension today. So there's no end to the Moors at all. Since time immemorial and into perpetuity, we're not going anywhere. We go wherever we want to go in terms of in the universe, but we're everywhere. So, but we must be competent in all that we do, especially with regards to the spells that are cast and written by anyone who's not us. In fact, they shouldn't even really be casting any spells and writing anything that has to do with us, which they haven't. We assented to go to accept that and chase after the gods of Europe. What are the gods of Europe? We're the gods of Europe, first of all. That's number one. But number two, in this particular reading, the gods of Europe, if you look at every single Federal Reserve debt note, they're telling you who their gods are. It says on every last one of them, in God we trust, and it's in all capital letters. So they were telling us who their gods are. And that is in the absence of the Moors, okay? When we were not standing, when we consented to go to sleep, they said, well, we need to replace all of those gods. We need a stand-in. And it became Federal Reserve debt notes that were based on the gods. They needed something to tie them to us. And so they used Federal Reserve debt notes. And what did we do? We chased after the Federal Reserve debt notes. The dead president. We chose to go into the underworld. So we have, with the Moorish sovereign delirium and its use, we have rebutted that properly, and we're back into the land of the living. We've always been the living. We needed to get onto the land, okay, and keep ourselves there because the land is a part of us. With that being said, I want to move on to speaking of the speaking of the mors savandalarium, I'm going to put this Title 12 USC 95A in the chat so that we can go over it really quickly and see the exact connection and why the mors savandalarium is working as well as it is working. Okay. Let me put this in here. Here's the link in the chat to what I'm about to read, okay? So we want to take a look at this particular USC code so that we can see exactly what we're doing and why in terms of the mors savandalarium and its ability to, just one moment. Okay. There's the link in the chat. So let's take a look at this USC code really quickly. Okay, it is on the screen. So the title of this Title 12 is Banks and Banking. Okay, we're looking at Title 12 USC 95A Part 2. And this is again talking about banking. The title of 95A is Regulation of Transactions in Foreign Exchange of Gold and Silver, Property Transfers, Vested Interest, Enforcement, and Penalties. And this is written by, just one moment, let me get rid of that. This is written by the foreigners, and so we want to keep that in mind as we're looking at this writing. Now, in the very first part of this writing, it says during the time of war, and that's the first thing I want to point out because we're not at war. We're at peace with everyone at this point. Okay, we're here to bring the peace. We're going to be the peace, period. So whenever we see war energy, we steer away from that. 95A Part 2 reads as follows. Any payment, conveyance, transfer, assignment, or delivery of property or interest therein made to or for the account of the United States or as otherwise directed, pursuant to this section or any rule, regulation, instruction, or direction issued hereunder, shall to the extent thereof be a full acquittance and discharge for all purposes of the obligation of the person making the same. And no person shall be held liable in any court for or in respect to anything done or omitted in good faith in connection with the administration of or in pursuance of and in reliance on this section or any rule, regulation, instruction, or direction issued hereunder. Okay? So what is that saying? First of all, the way that we would write that is the way we have written it here on the screen. Let me put that on the screen. This is the way we would write that. Okay? Because we know that we're not under any USC code. But what's happening with the delirium is that Moors are doing court actions, and it's telling you right here that anything that has to do with full acquittance and discharge, there has to be a court involved. That's number one. And the court must be the administrator of that full acquittance and discharge in order for it to happen. So when you're talking about finance, very deep within all of the USC codes is this one little code here that's saying that if there's going to be any acquittance and discharge of anything that has to do with anyone, it has to go through a court. There has to be some form of payment, conveyance, transfer, assignment, delivery, etc. Okay, there has to be some property involved. And in the past, we were unknowingly being held as surety for the property. Why? Because we were chasing after the guys of Europe who we knew nothing of. We were using their fiat. So in order for full acquittance and discharge to be done, here's the issue. And this is, and proof of that is what's been happening. We are the only ones who can discharge or give full acquittance on anything in any court, which is why when we were in those fake courts, they just went ahead and took us in order to discharge the debt. And they would say, okay, we'll give you 5 years in jail to get rid of this debt. And when you come out, that's full restitution, quote unquote. But that's because, number one, we were not being the court that we are today. Consular venue is the remedy for anything going on our land. Consular court, as ministered by the Moors, is the remedy for anything going on, whether it be tickets, quote-unquote speeding tickets, quote-unquote traffic issues, foreclosures, all of that stuff. All of that is debt that's being, that there's someone who is some piece of property that is, there's an attempt to take some property as surety for the debt. Because the Redeemer, which is all Moors, we're the redeemers of the whole earth when it comes to debt and property and court. So we looked in some of our previous calls at the meaning of the term discharge. Discharge is a charge that has been repositioned or moved. There's a difference between something being paid and something being discharged. A discharge just means that the debt has been transferred to someplace else. It's still there, but it's been transferred to someplace else. Well, in our case, what are we doing? First of all, we have no debt, but we do have subjects. And those subjects were doing as commanded by us. And in the process, some hypothecation and usurpation happened. And the subjects were turned into corporations. And when they were turned into corporations, that was automatic assumption of debt because all corporations are debtor conveyance utility. That is how debt is transferred and moved around, is by way of courts or corporations. And debt and debts are the same thing. So what are we doing? We are redeeming the whole earth. We're uplifting all of fallen humanity out of the grave, that shallow grave, to include ourselves, by the full acquittance and discharge by our Article 3 valid, superior, supreme, just did a little something there. Islam, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, Islam. Okay, did you all hear what I just said about the discharge, etc., of the debt? Okay. So there's some tapping into my phone that's being done, and they've been muting me and unmuting me, but I don't care about that because they can't do that forever, and we're not going to be quiet. So I'll just say what I said earlier. I'll repeat what I said. What I said was that where discharge of debt is concerned, we went over previously in some of the other calls what the word discharge means. Discharge means that the debt is moved someplace else. What's the purpose of discharging debt for us? The purpose of discharging debt is to prove that, first of all, that we are the Redeemer and we have the authority to move things around on our land. And previously, the debt was being unlawfully assigned to us and we were being held as surety for it. Okay? And now we're not being held as surety for it because we have risen from the dead. Dead, death, and debt are the same thing, all the same word, just derivatives thereof. So what are we doing with the more sovereign delirium? We are discharging the debt back to where it came from. We are letting the dead bury the dead. The corpses, when we give delirium for the debt, all we're doing is saying, those are our subjects, they're not corpses. They don't have any debt either. They're just in service to us. And corporations take your debt and get on out of here. That's what we're saying when we use delirium to discharge anything that has to do, and it comes through our courts. This is why our courts were so important, and this is also proof that courts and money go together. Courts and money go together. Because there has to be some way to discharge the debt. And whoever it is that is ministering the justice, their money underwrites all of their rulings. There's not a single ruling that has ever been issued, even by state corpses. And it's not a ruling that they issue. They're just running their mouths and talking. But we've been held to it because we didn't know. But there's not a single thing that's been said by anyone in those courts that were sitting in the space or place or office of a judge that was not underwritten by, in their case, fiat, and in our case, gold back more sovereign delirium, or gold and silver. That is the only way that a court action can be validated and administered, is that the court must be supported and upheld by gold. And it's not the court that's being upheld by it, it's the actual ruling. It's the commands that come from the court that is upheld by that. So that is what discharge is all about. And what are we doing when we discharge the debt? All we're doing is saying those are our subjects, and they are in service to us, not to a corporation. So that's setting the subjects free to do as commanded by the Moors. And I will tell you this, Moors, you can see that the subjects get that. How can you tell? Just look at the news. The subjects are leaving the corporate world, that corporate structure, not even concerned about how they're going to eat and how they're going to be taken care of, because they know we're going to do it. Because we've always done it. What do we have to do? Take care of ourselves first, save ourselves first. And we're doing that. We continue to do that. But en masse, they call it the Great Resignation. Resignation, think about that word. That means a re-signing. That means you're signing up again. Signing again with the Moors, back to the Constitution. And everyone who is leaving those places talking about, well, they're not taking a vaccine, what are they invoking to justify their leaving? The Constitution. Jurisdiction over their bodies. And those subjects who invoke the Constitution are saying we are the subjects of the Moors. We are not in service to a corporation. So that's where you're seeing these programs kick in, where there's, unemployment and all of these different programs that are kicking in, which is essentially amounting to a universal basic income, so that everyone can have some income while this transition continues. Because they know that they cannot be held liable either for debt, because the Moors are discharging the debt by our court and our delirium. So when delirium Moors, as remedy for the things that Moors are dealing with or think they're dealing with, where the quote-unquote Internal Revenue Service, Inquisition Revenue Service is concerned and all of that, any corporations that are speaking to courts, because that's all that is a corporation speaking to their court, and we think they're talking to us. That's all that was. So in the case of any of that, a court action and some delirium by affidavit. Now, here's the key again. When you issue delirium, you're not doing it as, let's just say, when I issue delirium, I'm not doing it as Pauline Denise Ritchie in Capita Sem Lucio Nolo, or like Tajiri Bay in Capita Sem Lucio Nolo in Reading. I'm issuing it as the fiduciary for the Empire State of Morocco. So now this is the state speaking. And there's only one state on this land, it's us. All else is inferior corpses and corporations, pretending to be the state. So now, that is how remedy is gained for anything that's going on. And Moors, I will say this about the remedy. Just because they send something in the mail does not mean that your remedy did not work. Okay? Just because they send something in the mail does not mean that your remedy didn't work. You just rebut what they send by, again, same thing. And sometimes you have to do it 3 times, because 3 times is the charm. 3 times is the spell. It just depends on the energies with regard to the demonstration, etc. Because again, this is all about casting and breaking spells. When they send things in the mail, that's nothing but a spell. And when the Moors open it, energies come out of that issue of whatever it is they send. There's an energy even when Moors see those things come through the mail and they think that they're talking to them. There's an energy that comes over the Moors just going to the mailbox. Some Moors don't even want to go to the mailbox because of the spells that are in there or that might be in there. And we have to know that any spell, there's no spell that can come anywhere in any mailbox or anything of any kind that's stronger than the spells that we cast and break. Simply by virtue of being right back in our proper status and honoring our foremothers and forefathers and going after the gods of Islam, which is the Moors. Allah is all law. Arm, leg, arm, head. That's us. We must pursue ourselves. And that this is how it's done. This is one way that it's done. There are many other ways that it's done. So let's move on to yet another way that this is done. We're going to speak briefly about ancient English and the emerging patterns thereof, where ancient English is concerned. A brief historic, it has to really be thought about in order to know what's really happening with ancient English. And also why some are not comfortable with ancient English. Ancient English is presenting us in a way that is very revealing. It's giving us some information that we needed to know about ourselves. Okay? With ancient English, it is derived from deep within the ancient spirits of the Moors. Moors who are writing in ancient English regularly on social media and in their affidavits, on the Moorish American Consulate Public Records page, and, you know, out there on where others can see it. Moors are demonstrating that which comes naturally to them. And it is outside of the United States Corporation Company and its teaching, its education. Okay? It's outside of that. Ancient English is an energy that flows freely from within each of us, and it manifests uniquely for each of us. Why is this type of creator energy so important and necessary? This creator energy is so important and necessary because it is the very first national manifestation of the language patterns that indicate the natural ancient elements that run in our tribal bloodlines, and more specifically, which can point us to those among us who are of the same, more specific clan line. This is a far more scientific methodology to further pinpoint both our oneness and our specific bloodlines within that oneness. As this natural energy manifests, the words that appear when Moors are writing in ancient English freely, just creating from within them, that manifestation, those manifestations are pointing to the ancient tribes and nations that each of us knew from ancient times. For example, I have noticed on social media that some ancient English manifestations point more to the Hebraic or the Hebrew language, while others, mine included, contain more French tendencies. And we know that we are the French as well. We're Spanish. We're all of the original indigenous nations. Other Moors generally gravitate and create their words and their spells in the direction of Arabic, or even some of the supposed lost languages and dialects. What is most interesting about the many different manifestations of the free-flowing ancient energy that ancient English has activated is that certain Moors are manifesting similarly, which is the very first ancient indicator of clan relations based on the specific language spoken and written by their particular clans since time immemorial. Those Moors who naturally tend toward Hebraic words, for example, and spelling, are manifesting ancient language tribal ties with one another that can only be discovered by observing the similarities in their free-flowing spelling, word construction, intention, and usages. This is the first time in our existence in this dimension that this ancient language science and tribal connections has been able to be observed so naturally without any foreign obstruction. Additionally, all spelling algorithms have been completely shattered and broken and then changed and recreated by the heirs. We can know more about ourselves through our use of ancient English, which does contain ancient words from all languages, so no one can say it's not ancient because it brings in the words from all the ancient languages and dialects. And no spellings or manifestations are off limits, which means we can freely create straight from within us, each one, their own specific way. And it is, yes, in the chat, Justice Theodore says, it is non-hypothecatable because it's coming straight from each one of us. And so these manifestations, there's no spelling, no language, no expression that is off limits to us. We can create however we want to create, and the amazing thing is, of all the different manifestations, there's not one that we've not been able to understand. We are speaking our own language like it's second nature, it's our first language. Okay? So some of the Moorish manifestations appear highly advanced. They're using punctuations that we don't normally use or in place of letters, and it's just amazing. Some appear highly advanced and complicated, while others are simplistic and specific and still unhypothecatable. But all are understood clearly and from a far more concise, intentional place in a way that corporate English could never manifest. We get to say what we mean and mean what we say, and no one can change it. We have the opportunity to explain what we mean, and it cannot be mistaken, misconstrued, etc. Because if you'll remember, in some of our previous affidavits, we used to put this statement at the bottom of the affidavit that says, nothing in this sovereign affidavit is to be construed as jurisdiction to, the fraudulent jurisdiction of the corporation. You know, so we were invoking jurisdiction, saying, don't misconstrue anything that's in here and then put us in the wrong jurisdiction. That's what we were saying before. But when we use ancient English, we don't even have to put that there because we are actually, there's no way they can say, oh, we see that you use the word of, and of means without. They can't say that. No one can say that. We get to determine by our use of it and by the context that it's used in and the spelling of it. Corporate English could never do that for us. The only thing corporate English did, which is why they hammered into our heads, you got to spell it this way. It must be written this way. You got to start it with a capital letter. And if you spell it that way, you're wrong. That's wrong. It must be spelled this way, and you must use black ink, dead ink. The rules for ancient English spring from deep within each of us for the first time ever. This is the first time that we can watch other Moors' ancient English and say, that looks like They might be from the French tribe, the ancient French tribe. And the ancient French tribe did this and that and this and that, and we can look back and see what they invented and what they did. Or they may be from the ancient Phoenician tribe, because we're all Phoenicians anyway. And that's why we can use ancient English so freely. I'll use the word of, for example, because we talked about the word of. The word of, as in United States of America versus United States for America. We had to change the whole word when, using corporate English, or common English, we had to change the whole word. And I won't even say corporate English because we never were using corporate English. If we were, they would have understood everything we said in those state courts. Because that's what they were speaking. We were not speaking corporate English the whole time. And they knew that. But yes, let's use the word of, as an example. Some Moors have manifested this word as ov, or of, which is Hebraic, or of the Hebrew dialect, or Hebrew language, and it points to our ancient divine powers and abilities, sometimes referred to as divination and witchcraft. Okay? We manifested greatly by of, the Hebraic word of, much to the dismay of attempted usurpers, which is why there was specific attempts to use fear and modern religion to stop our sovereign manifestation. They were saying, don't misspell, quote unquote, what you're writing. Spell it properly, spell it correctly, use proper nouns and proper English, when that was never proper for us. But this is why. Because it was going to point us back to our unified languages that we spoke within what we're doing, within our nation. So, in the chat, if it says decapitalization replaced by mass nationalization and distribution, circulation, and transactions in commerce. No more fighting. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. No more fighting for crumbs. We own the table that the nations of the world sit on for time immemorial. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It has everything to do with our self-expression. Self-determination, that's what ancient English is. And that's why some fight it. It's self-determination. Self-determination. As a nation and as sui generis, individual more. It is game over when we use ancient English. Because I can look at the ancient English of some Moors out there and say, I'm going to have to look in their, I'm going to have to ask them about their, who was their grandma, who was their aunt, who are they, their immediate relations, because we know we're all related. But the tribe of the Phoenicians and the tribe of the Greeks, or Creeks, because they call them, they changed the G to a C and said Creek Indians, when that's not who that is. We're the Greeks. And we can look and say, we write the same, we manifest the same. Through our ancient writings, we manifest the same. So let's see, where were you geographically? Where were you on the land? Oh, you all are from Alabama territory. Okay. Well, no wonder you write like that. No wonder, because that was pretty common in Mobile, Alabama, or Montgomery, Alabama tribe, or wherever. And I'm just using that as example. Or the Detroit Moors, because I was actually born at Detroit territory. So Some Moors may use the word of. Of is magic. It is divination and witchcraft. Witchcraft is actually spelled W-H-I-C-H. Witchcraft. Which craft are you using? Which word are you crafting your spell with? That's what witchcraft is. Let's make no mistake about it. That's why they want us to put a whole bunch of scary BS over everything. Scare you to death and then put you into a quote-unquote church, and we're not mad at the churches. Put you in some place where they're going to scare you away from that, and then put you in their education camps and say, don't spell it. Do not spell the way you want to spell. You can't just spell it the way you want to spell it. You got to spell it the way we tell you to spell it. And ancient English says, no, we're going to pull straight from our soul and from our ancient bloodline and birthright. And some more spell the word of UF, which is more of the Latin, the ancient Latin or Sanskrit usage of the word. We, again, manifested greatly by of, much to the dismay of the usurpers. Those who naturally gravitate towards or even prefer this spelling are tapping into the ancient energy of the Magi's and prophetesses of the Hebraic tribes and nations. Other Moors have manifested this word as UF, which is the ancient Latin or Sanskrit usage of the word, which is just as magic. I just decided to go out there and pull and see what are they saying about Of and Yidoni, witchcraft and divination in the Hebrew Bible. And of course, the Hebrew Bible, quote unquote, that we look at now has been hypothecated, so they're going to make it seem like it's something bad. Well, since when is being able to manifest what you say bad? That's what witchcraft and divination is. It's divine energy and power to manifest that which you see. And we know that jurisdiction is in the word. That's why ancient English pulling those words straight from your spirit. And then looking around and seeing who is it that's manifesting similarly. Connect with them. Because when you connect with them, you're going to find some similarities that are just unmistakable. Unmistakable. And I wouldn't be surprised if you find out you all have up through your lines the same aunt or the same grandma or the same great-grandma or the same, somewhere along those lines. So that is the importance of ancient English and its national expression and why there was such a fight against it. Out there on social media, we got more pushback out there from foreigners who did not want us outside of their construct. They didn't. And they even developed, quote unquote, spell check. They were checking our spells and saying, no, don't cast your own spell, cast our spell, so that you can stay bound under our spell and not your own. And don't free yourself. That's what spell check is all about. Who in the heck is doing the checking? Who is that's doing the checking? That's why we shut that off and we spell it the way we want to spell it. We mute. And I'm not saying you have to do that. You don't have to mute it if you don't want to. I do. Because they don't tell me how to spell. They don't have the authority to check my spelling. I'm manifesting from within, from the ancient Akashic record, and so are all Moors. Ancient Akashic record. As well, Justice Theodore put, and fact checkers as well. Fact checkers, how you gonna check somebody's facts? The hyper, they don't know facts. They don't know sovereign facts. So they can't check someone's facts. And check is actually a financial term as well, isn't it? That's why you can write a check. That's a financial term. And they're trying to keep you under their financial spell. That's why delirium is so important. Because it matches what comes from our spirit. Okay? Are there any questions, comments? Just one moment. Let me make sure that I have on the screen. I don't even know how that's going. Oh, yes. Okay. So are there any questions or comments? Let me take it out of lecture mode. Anyone who wants to put forth any wisdom or questions, comments, issues with regard to anything that's going on in our nation? Islam. We open the floor at this time. Islam.
Islam?
Islam. Islam interest.
Am I hard to hear?
If you'll speak up just a little louder, Empress, we'll be able to hear you.
All right. Yeah, I'm got bad connection. Is that better?
Yes, that's better. We can hear you.
Yes, that's better. Okay, there's a long delay, but I'm going to say it anyway. Thank you for this conversation today. It reminds me of that Roberta Flack song, "Killing Me Softly" with his song. Everything that you're reading and you're saying today has been pretty much my life as far as dealing with that language, and I have struggled with that because when you look at it, most of the time it doesn't make sense, and so everything you said about self-expression and I see it in us Moors, you know, when we're with each other, you know, certain similarities. I see all the things that you are saying, and thank you. It's a beautiful thing that's happened to us all, and I appreciate this work. I yield. Islam.
Islam. Islam.
Go ahead, Empress. Islam.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
No, I'm going to. Yes, I'm going to yield. I have a bad connection, but I will send you a message.
Okay. Islam. We can hear
you,
Empress. We can hear you.
You can now? Oh, I just went through this long speech. Anyway, I was saying that this conversation today and this knowledge reminds me of the Roberta Flack song, "Killing Me Softly" with his song.
Yes.
You're speaking my life, you know, and dealing with that language. And then being persecuted because I wanted to do something different. So anyway, basically that's what I said, and I really appreciate this work. I can feel the chains, you know, being, you know, broken, you know, each time I come to these calls. So anyway, thank you, Empress.
Yes.
I yield.
Yes.
Islam.
Yes. Thank you, Empress. Listen, the ancient English, when I realized what the ancestors were doing with it, I just thought it's the beginning of the high sciences manifesting in our nation in a way that is just amazing because it's showing patterns among the heirs that says, okay, the pattern that this group of heirs is exhibiting says that they are, you can almost put us in a location on the land from ancient times. You can almost place us where our ancestors were by the similarities between the ancient English spellings that we're using. And after a while, we'll be able to tell which, what we actually did. Now, I know that from where I'm from, and in looking at my bloodline and birthright, I know that we did law. I know that. And we all did, all Moors did law. We did it in the different sciences. For example, the Moors who were scientists, where astrology is concerned, they wrote the law regarding astrology. The Moors who did things where, let's say, civil and criminal issues were concerned with the subject, they wrote the laws there. The Moors who were scientists with regard to chemistry wrote the laws of chemics and physics. So we've always made and written the law, and it's just manifesting. That creative ability is being reawakened in us by the use of ancient English. So there are parts of our brain that we have been told, and our consciousness as well, and our spirit, that we have not been using because it was all pinpointed and guided towards the most basic, incompetent education possible. I'm looking in the chat, and there's a running theme of what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. It says, Justice Morpheus says he has to use ancient English. He says he does realize why. He said he struggled with English from kindergarten and college. Looking back now, he understands why. Islam, yes, your ancient expression was trying to make its way through the whole time. And now you know why when we were little, they gave us vaccines to stifle that, to make us more compliant and docile, so that we would not naturally rebut what they were telling us. Because we have a natural rebuttal to it. And here's the crazy part about that for me that is just so mind-blowing when I think about just like myself and my experiences. I won the spelling bees in school. In the 4th grade at Peter Crump Elementary School, which is where I went to school in Montgomery, Alabama, I was winning spelling bees and all of that. Those who were in school with me know that. Because I was good at staying inside the lines. And now that the spirit is activated and the Akashic records are activated, I see why things were done the way they were done. Now, I'm not mad at that because they gave us a very basic meaning of the base word. And then they taught us prefixes and suffixes and how those prefixes and suffixes generally. Okay, so they gave us a very general, basic, it's really incompetent when you think about the high sciences that we actually deal with in our spirit and in our Akashic record. Yes, Justice Theodore says, I feel an Akashic connection. It is the knowing. Yes. When I realized what the ancestors were doing with the ancient English piece, I thought, you all are brilliant. I keep telling the ancestors, you guys are brilliant. How did you do that? You're brilliant. And that's just how I talk to them. They're just brilliant. The sibyls, the prophetesses, they used the sibyls because, you know, it's the Holy Sybil, not the Holy Bible. We talked about that. They needed to use the language in order to manifest what we're manifesting right now. Our ancient ancestors could not wait for us to get to this part right here, where we're at right now. Yes, this is, I almost said jurisdiction, jurisdiction, jurisdiction. Do you know how far outside of a corporate jurisdiction we are when we use ancient English alone? If you properly spell, and when I say properly spell, I mean using ancient English. Any word like jurisdiction, you put an E on the end, you're already outside of the corporate space. When Moors back in the day, I remember specifically when I first nationalized, I was reading the case of some Moors at Detroit Territory who went into the state court. And they went in there with affidavits and everything. And the first thing that the state court said about the affidavits that they wrote was that it was gobbledygook, and they couldn't understand it. It's a bunch of hodgepodge of blah blah blah, legal blah blah blah. Well, the reason they were saying that is because at the time the Moors didn't know that black ink in capital letters was a fraudulent, a fake jurisdiction with regard to the production of the hybrids in their court. So the hybrids would interpret that from their perspective and from their quote unquote education center, and then call it trash and say it's all wrong, because they're looking at it as if they wrote it. But they cannot mistake anything that we write for their dialect or their corporate dead language, because it's not written in dead ink. It's not written. There's no capital letters, so we're outside of that jurisdiction. And the thing is, can you imagine with all the different manifestations of ancient English that's manifesting right now, can you imagine that we are the majority and they only have one jurisdiction, and we got all this out here with all the different spellings and all the different dialects and all the ancient English manifestations, the Hebraic, the Latin, the Sanskrit, the Spanish, the German, the French. I mean, we have all of this room out here, and they have that one corporate English space. It's hard for us to fit back into that jurisdiction. If we tried, we couldn't do it, because we've already tapped into our nature with ancient English. I mean, I was looking at some of the ancient English as written by some of the Moors, out on social media, and some of the empresses. I looked at their ancient English and I thought, how high in the sciences was your tribe? Because it's complicated and it's way up there in terms of its presentment. But we could all understand what they were saying, and Moors were responding back in their ancient English dialects and language and tongue. And you could see some French in some, and you could see Spanish in others, and you could see Sanskrit and Latin in others, and you could see German in others, and all of that. And some Moors weren't even using letters. They were using some letters, a mix of letters and punctuation marks, and a mixture of, I'm like, I didn't even know all of that existed on a keyboard. Some of the stuff they were using, and we could understand all of it, every bit of it, and we knew exactly what they meant because of the ancient connection that we all have. And now I'm seeing that as I've continued to use ancient English on social media, that, and this is the part that just makes me so, it makes me a little bit emotional in a good way, is that my brothers and sisters who were not awake when we started this, they're starting to actually comment on the things that we're saying because they understand it. And they're not even proclaimed on the public record. They just feel like they can comment, and they are absolutely right. So we've got this. All we have to do is keep doing what we're doing, because now that these patterns in our languages is being established, okay, now that it's being established, we can actually look around and start seeing one another in the languages and the manifestations that we're using. We can start seeing connections. And then or if there's no, like if one of the Moors that writes a lot like I do, if we can't pinpoint something in our clan line where maybe we come from the same area or land, or we have relatives in common, then it's going to be the next commonality between us is going to be, well, what did your family do? What did they do? Were they, did they harvest the land? Were they scientists? Were they teachers? Were they doctors? Were they what did they do? And I say doctors, but I'm talking even before all of that. Historically, what did they do? Did they do law? Were they astrologers, cosmologists? All of that. What did they do? And there may be commonalities there, and there will be undoubtedly. Undoubtedly, there will be. So there are a couple of other topics that I wanted to go through today, but I think we'll stop here, or pause here rather, and we'll pick back up tomorrow at 7, because we have some more really good awarenesses that the ancestors are making us aware of as we continue to put forth our sovereign jurisdiction and who we really are, because another great characteristic that we're manifesting with ancient English is it makes it so that no courts can rebut it properly. No court. So as we move about in international commerce, and we're moving about in the claiming of the vast estate, just think about it. When we claim, let's just use a domicile, for example. When we claim a domicile using ancient English and our sovereign affidavits and our seals and stamps of our government, how can a fake corporate court rebut that? How? How can they effectively rebut it? By trying to pull some property back into a corporate jurisdiction? Nope, can't do that. Why? Because when we claim something, we're claiming it's not an address, it's a mailing location. So it's not even in the same dimension that the corporate stuff is in. It's not even in the same dimension. It's not even, you could essentially say it's not even on the same planet. So there can be no corporate rebuttal to the things that we do. And then we're doing it from our court. Everything that we say, every word that proceeds out of our mouth is coming from our court. That's why we do everything by court action. Period. Who can rebut that? What court has the authority to rebut it? No corporate court whatsoever. So with that being said, we know now that we started this call with the reading from the Circle 7. And we can truly say that our nationality is returned to us by us based on chapter 47, verse 17. We have manifested who we truly are, and we continue to do that. So with that being said, if there's nothing further, peace and grand rising to the sovereign, original, indigenous, natural.
Grand rising.
Islam.
Grand Rising.
Islam.
Grand rising.
Islam. Islam.
Grand Rising. Much love, much love.
Peace and love.
Islam.
Long live the Moorish Empire.